Hi, good morning, everybody, and we are welcoming you to the Jewish Spirituality and Meditation course. Please let me know if you are in the group so I can see who's there. I'm going to post this message to social media now. Again, let me know if you are here. Just spreading this. Hi, Stephanie. Good morning. I'm sharing this onto social media for anybody that can just spread the word. Okay. Okay. Hi, Graciela. Good morning. Nice to see you, Graciela. Shalom, shalom. How's it going? If you guys could share this video on your page or something, it would help us to spread the word, get the message out there so we can let people know. And we go to the class. So here we are, Stephanie, Graciela. Let me see who else we've got here. How else can we promote this? If you could share your comments, Graciela or Steph, if you were here yesterday, how you felt about the class, how's it moving, in which direction. I mentioned to you that yesterday I'm really starting this course. I'm doing it all completely original. So if you can help me, it would help us to spread the word, get the message out there. If you could help me with comments and let me know which direction we should move it into, that would be very helpful. Hi, Cookie. Hi, Ed. Good morning. If you could help me, guide it. I got a really nice comment from Alex Axelrod last night. I guess he was watching it from Folsom, California, with Alona, and it was really nice. Really nice to to get his comments. He said that he's been hoping for this kind of class forever, and he was thrilled to be able to see that this is happening. So let's make it happen, folks. The premise of this class is basically that when people come into shul, they don't know what's flying. It's just not a spiritual experience. Why would they want to stay? Why would they want to come back? Here they are. They've managed to overcome the inhibition of walking through the doors of a shul. And as soon as they walk in, somebody hands them a book that weighs pounds or 10 pounds. Heavy book. They're like, OMG. Right there, that's a spiritual experience. Oh my God. They're like, how am I going to read all these words in a different language? How is this a spiritual experience? And that's what we're trying to achieve in this course. These classes are recorded so that we can post them as part of a series. So anybody in the future who wants to understand the context of what prayer is about can hopefully go through these classes and be able to experience that. Through this course, I want you to know we're going to be covering 3 levels. Number 1 is a basic ability to read in Hebrew. A basic ability to read in Hebrew. Number 2, we'll be going through that through the course. Number 2 is a familiarity with one paragraph at a time. I want you to own a paragraph of davening. We're going to be taking on a paragraph of Aleinu. The first paragraph of Aleinu is going to be yours, not because you know how to sing it. Not because you know how to sing it, but because every word is understood by you. And in order to do that, I need you to keep a diary. That diary is the Hebrew word diary. We're going to be reaching 100 words in our diary. Yesterday, we came up with 2 words. Number 1 was the word tamid, which means always. The second word was da'at, which means realization or subjective understanding. Folks, I'm here alone, and the water guy just arrived. So I better open the door for the water guy. Just don't go away, folks. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Thank you, sir. All right, so I'm back. The point is, I'm hopeful that you'll be able to keep track of your Hebrew word diary, so that way you'll notice these words. If you go through them regularly, you'll notice the roots will repeat themselves in many, many, many other places through the service, that you'll know what they mean. Once you know what they mean, once you have a familiarity with level 2 of our learning beyond reading, is the ability to understand the meaning of the words, you'll be able to reach third level, which is the meditation behind each concept, and how the prayer is a spiritual as well as a meditative experience, and to give you the tools for how to meditate. So again, please post your comments or questions on the side of here. It's very helpful to know what you're thinking and what you're struggling with. How is prayer a spiritual experience? How is it that you're supposed to be able to walk into a shul and somehow connect spiritually? So yesterday we spoke about how initially we were connecting to God through the offerings in the temple. You literally had to give a piece of yourself to God when you had a major life experience, whether that was a sin or forgiveness or a Jewish holiday or Thanksgiving, whatever you were going through in your life's experience, you would give a piece of yourself to God. Literally, you'd give a piece of your wealth to God. It was like a big donation. But when the temple was destroyed, that was transferred into a verbal conversation with God. Because that's how we human beings develop relationships, by talking to each other. If you want to develop a relationship with someone, you got to talk to them. You got to be able to find your words. If you want to marry someone, you go on a date, and what you do is you talk. That's how you get into a relationship. Same thing with God. In order to get into a relationship with God, you got to be able to talk. The problem is that if you're dating someone who's sitting across from you, that's one thing. It's easy to relate. You can talk about things that you see and you share, and talk about the weather, talk about the sports. It's easy to relate and to talk about something. But when it comes to God, it's kind of difficult to establish a relationship, to talk to something that you don't even see. That's challenging. And that's why our sages instituted for us the template of the prayer book. Because the template of the prayer book is designed to be able to help us focus on our thoughts, to be able to get us in the zone. And that's the key here, folks. That's the key of the context of the spirituality of prayer. The purpose of the prayers is to get you and me in the zone, to realize who I'm talking to. Because if you're on a date, on a blind date, and you never see, if they never take off the blindfold and you never see who you're talking to, it's going to be very difficult to have a conversation with an entity that you can't see. It's like literally a blind date. And that's going to go south pretty quickly. That's effectively what we're doing every time we're coming to Shul to daven. We're talking to an entity that we can't see. So to be able to bridge the gap, our sages instituted for us the format of prayer that is a platform to bring us to a state where we can remember and appreciate who we're talking to. But that doesn't happen in a second. It doesn't happen like, okay, we're talking to God, go for it. It doesn't happen like that. We are complex, complicated, deeply flawed human beings. We have all sorts of anxieties and addictions and problems and complications. We're not easy to deal with. We're complicated. We need to sort of clear our mind from the nonsense and introduce into our mind the stuff we're supposed to think about. We're supposed to think about that stuff. And the goal is that once you've reached the point where you realize before whom you stand, at that point, you're able to pour your heart out naturally, organically before God. And that's the spiritual context of prayer. So the way it works is that we start off in the day. We wake up in the morning, where we are physically as well as spiritually unconscious. Physically unconscious, you are sleeping, and you are spiritually unconscious because you're not aware of God around you. You're just not aware. You wake up, you just feel yourself. You don't feel God when you wake up in the morning. So the first thing you need to do is to recognize. You need to just recognize the presence of God. That's why we go like this in the morning. We put our hands together. First thing we do, the moment we wake up, is we say, Modeh ani lefanecha. I thank you, God Almighty, for having restored my soul within me. Great is your faithfulness. That's all. We say, look, I know I'm talking to you. I don't know anything about you, God. I just want to say that I recognize your existence. That's it. We just verbally recognize that we're talking. We're grateful to God for having restored our soul within us. But then we progress through the various morning blessings. This is very general, very, very general right now. We progress through the morning blessings, which are effectively an opportunity to be able to thank God. Just to thank God for the clothing and for the ability to move and for the proper functioning of our body parts and for the restoring of our soul and for waking us up and for opening our eyes and for letting us stand up and all the things that we take for granted. We're saying, God, thank you. That's the morning blessings. Then when you sit down in the synagogue and when you start to daven, the beginning of prayer is a recognition that we're very unsophisticated at this point. We're standing at a point that we know that we are talking to an entity that has granted us a lot of kindness. We're grateful, but we don't really understand and appreciate the extent of that gratitude. So what we do is at the beginning of the morning service is that we start off with something called Psukei de Zimra, which is songs of praise. And here you'll find a lot of praises for God. Praised are those who dwell in your home. They will praise you forever. And you read praise upon praise upon praise upon praise. And you think, oh my God, this God of ours has a deeply flawed insecurity complex. You think, if God needs me to give him praise, I don't know. I'm a little concerned about his mental health. It's easy for us to say that, why on earth would God, the master of the universe, need me to praise him? And the answer is he doesn't. We praise God not because God needs our praises, but because we need to hear those praises. When we praise God for the acts of creation, for the wind and the sun and the moon and the stars and the animals and the food of the animals and the food of the human beings, it's then that it suddenly dawns upon us that God is in control of everything all the time. Not because God needs to know that God is in charge, but that we need to know that God is in charge. And that's the purpose of the meditations of the beginning of the morning service. The purpose of them is for us to be able to verbally affirm God's greatness, so that when you do so, you become aware, not that God becomes aware, that you become aware of the greatness of God. Now, after this point, we move into the second, third, and fourth sections of the prayer. I'm talking about the morning prayer right now, which is the blessings before the Shema. There's the Shema, there's the silent Amidah, and then there's the conclusion. That's already a whole different discussion. But for the purposes of this discussion right now, I'll just say that when it comes to the verses of praise, what's called Pesukei de Zimra, there's something very powerful about the way you're supposed to daven, which is verbally audible. You're supposed to daven in a way that does not disturb the people near you, but still is something that you are able to hear. So, for example, I'm going to illustrate. You're supposed to daven like this. It's like a whisper that's audible only to yourself. That way, you can hear your own prayer, but the people around you don't get distracted. What you're not supposed to do is to daven like this. You're not supposed to daven with your eyes, because if you're only davening with your eyes, you're not verbalizing it. It has to be something which is verbalized to your own ears. What happens is something extraordinary. You see, if you're thinking something, it's very, very different to what happens when you verbalize something. Have you ever noticed what happens when you say the words, "I hate you" to someone? You know, it's one thing to think that you hate someone, but when you say that, it automatically stirs up an emotion. Even when you just said those words, when you just said, "I hate you," you automatically stirred up some sort of an emotion of negative energy. An emotion that was not stirred up by the thought alone. Think of what happens when you say to someone, "I love you." Let's say you're in an argument with your spouse. You had an argument with your spouse. That happens once in a while. If you had an argument and you go over to your spouse and you say, "I love you deeply and unconditionally and forever and for always." By verbalizing those words, something very magical happens. You actually begin to feel a sense of love. The verbalization of those words causes you to feel something inside of you. Whereas if you only thought about it, it doesn't look like that. It's a Kabbalistic mechanism. The principle, just to explain it intellectually, is based upon the principle that the highest levels and the lowest levels are always connected. I want you to think for a moment. This is going to be a little interesting. Who are the people that walk barefoot? Think about this for a moment. What kind of people in the world walk barefoot? So right away you think about, I guess, the poor people. Poor people in Africa that can't afford clothes, they walk barefoot. But you know who else walks around barefoot? The extremely wealthy, like the billionaires. They're the kind of people that will walk around. I mean, maybe you could say, who walks around without socks might be a good example for us in Palm Beach. So you got people that can't afford clothes. In Africa, they walk around without socks. I see it all the time in Africa. But then when you come to Palm Beach, something fascinating happens. When the moment people move to Palm Beach, one of the first things that disappears is the socks. And you say, what, they can't afford the socks? No, it's not that they can't afford the socks. They just don't have socks. It's an amazing thing. If you think about it, who doesn't daven? This might be more of a personal example. Who doesn't pray? Who doesn't pray? So you say, well, I guess the people that are not religious don't pray. And then you also say the rabbis don't pray. You know what the rabbis don't pray? Because the rabbis are so busy helping other people to learn how to pray and to lead the service and to do whatever they need to do, is that the rabbis don't get time to pray on their own the way they would have wanted to. So it turns out that the people at the very, very top and the people at the very, very bottom are actually connected. And you'll find across the board every single facet of the universe. I'm not sure if you can think of examples right now. But think about it, who doesn't pay taxes? Think about this. Who doesn't pay taxes? This might be a political statement. I don't know if it is. But certainly the people that make money don't pay taxes. But then if I think about it, the people that pay the most, the people that make the most money, I think this is a political statement. I'm sorry. I'm not sure how it works in Senate and in Congress if those guys pay taxes. But maybe you could say about government insurance plans. Who has government insurance? So people who don't have too much money, and people at the Senate and at the Congress, I guess they have their own insurance plans. What happens is that the way God created this world is that the highest level and the lowest level are always connected, because this world was created through an energy called circles in Kabbalah. Through the energy called circles. Spiritual concept. And what a circle is basically a line where the two ends are touching. You'll find this, by the way, another good example of this is in politics. You'll find that the extreme right and the extreme left actually agree on a lot of things. So, for example, the very, very secular Jews, very, very secular Jews are like anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, that kind of thing. And then you'll find the extreme right religious. You got these Hasids that protest against the Holocaust with Iran. They protest against Israel. Anytime there's an AIPAC or an Israel event, the Hasids will stand out there with signs and say, Israel has no right to exist. You've seen them on television. The media loves to portray these guys. You got the very, 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 very religious and the very, 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 very secular, and they're actually saying the same thing. It's amazing. You'll notice it a lot in politics, where the extreme right and the extreme left say the same thing. And the reason is because God created this world from an energy of circles, where the very beginning and the very end are actually touching. They touch in a circle. The two ends touch. And therefore, when it comes to, why am I saying this whole thing? How does it relate to prayer? When it comes to our spiritual evolution, from our soul, how our soul expresses itself inside of our body, there's the highest levels of our soul, which is the essence of our soul, the emotions, the feeling of our soul. And then there's the very most external expression of our soul, which is thought, speech, and action. Thought, speech, and action. The very, very last levels of the soul's expression, which is how it expresses itself, are deeply and intimately connected with the soul's deepest and earliest essence. This is the reason, friends, why when you fake it, you make it. When you fake it, you make it. The reason is how we behave on the outside profoundly impacts how we feel on the inside. Now, this idea is counterintuitive, because you would have thought that you behave on the outside the way you feel on the inside, but it's not true. You feel on the inside the way you behave on the outside. Indeed, the Talmud tells us, praised is the Torah scholar whose inside is like his outside. You got to make sure that your inside will follow your outside. You'll notice a lot of things about Judaism relate to this. For example, when somebody is in mourning, what do? We make sure they take their shoes off, they walk around in socks, they sit on low stools, they cover the mirrors, they tear the clothing. Why is this all necessary? It seems very non-spiritual to give them such a template of all the things that you have to do to feel bad. You think, mima nafshach, using Talmudic parlance, you think, if you feel bad about the loss of your loved one, good, you feel bad. And if you don't feel bad, then why do you have to make it feel bad? The answer is, by going through the motions of behaving like a mourner, walking without shoes, sitting on a low stool, covering the pictures, tearing the garment, those external behaviors of bereavement will arouse a feeling of sadness and bereavement within. When you go to a wedding and you're not in the mood, you're not feeling good, you don't feel great, and you want to participate, it's someone you love and you want to participate, but you're just not feeling like dancing, you know what you should do? Throw yourself into the dancing circle, jump right in, and you'll notice what happens when you jump right in. Very soon and very quickly, you'll notice that you're starting to feel cheerful, because on the outside you're dancing, you'll notice that on the inside you start to feel cheerful too. And this principle is acher, in the words of the Torah, achrei hamaisim nimshachim halavavis. Behind the actions, follow the hearts. Behind the actions, follow the hearts. Because the very, very lowest part of our soul, our action and speech, is deeply connected with our essence, which is our hearts, which is how we feel at the essence of our soul. If you want to guide the way that you feel about someone, use words. Say, I love you. When you say, I love you to that person, you will cause a feeling of love. And this applies to thought as well, by the way. When you think about someone, loving feelings, that will arouse the feelings of emotion. But the more you go external, the more external the soul, the more deeper it's drawn from the essence of the soul. So thought, speech, and action. Thought is higher than speech, which is higher than action. Action is the lowest part of our soul expression. How we express ourselves on the outside will draw the deepest essence of our soul. And therefore, when you act in a certain way, it will cause you to feel that way. Achrei hamaisim, after the actions, follow the hearts. You'll notice when you give charity. If you're not in the mood of giving charity, you're not feeling charitable. You'll notice when you give charity, it will cause you to feel generous. Not that feeling generous makes you charitable. It's that being charitable makes you feel generous. And that's why, if you want to connect with God spiritually, If you want to develop a relationship with God, which is what prayer is actually all about, the way to do that is not by first feeling spiritual and then talking to God. It's first by talking to God, or more specifically, talking about God. And that verbalization of the greatness of God is what's going to bring you to feel spiritual on the inside. And that is the spiritual context of what's happening when you're walking into a synagogue. When you walk into a shul, I want to encourage you to jump right in. To jump right in as if you were jumping into a swimming pool, as if you were jumping into a dance at a wedding. Go through with emotions, read the words, verbalize the words, and don't constantly ask yourself, why am I doing this? How is this spiritual? How is this supposed to work? I don't understand. This is ridiculous. We need to change it. Stop thinking about all that. Just go with the flow. Throw yourself in. Read the words. Allow the words to be heard by your mouth. And again, if you can't daven in Hebrew has tremendous power to it. But if you can't daven in Hebrew, then daven in English. Read the words. You don't need to read all the words. Read the one paragraph or the 5 paragraphs that you can connect with. Read it slowly. Read it deliberately. Allow it to be heard by your own ears. And that will arouse a fascinating emotion within you. When you read about the benevolence of God, about the unconditional kindness, the philanthropy, the extraordinary justice of God, the power of God, how God is the master of the entire universe, and how for some inexplicable reason he cares about little me and my choices are important to him, suddenly you'll be filled with this extraordinary sense of purpose. We're going to develop that theme a little bit later in the evolution of davening. But for the very beginning, for lesson 2 today, I just want to leave you with this notion of what the context of prayer is and where we're coming from. We're coming from a perspective where God is here, we just don't really sense him. But to be able to approach God in prayer, you want to do that in a way where you are first, you're not waiting to be spiritual before you can talk to God. It's the talking to God that's going to make you feel spiritual. And that's the lesson that I want to leave you with today in lesson 2 of an introduction to Jewish spirituality and meditation through prayer. It's a very important baseline for us to be able to understand how we're approaching prayer and how it's a spiritual experience. And I know it's counterintuitive. I know that you don't feel like this is, it doesn't come organically. It's something which you can only experience when you try it. So I want to encourage you to try it. When you're at home now, you have plenty of time in your hands, you're in quarantine, you have nothing to do and nowhere to go. Take out a prayer book and see if you can recite a prayer. Read one paragraph and try to just verbalize it deliberately without being critical. See how you feel and let me know how that goes. With that, folks, I'm going to wish you a good Shabbos. Thank you for joining me here this morning. I'm going to carry on Monday morning. I'm going to take a break on Sunday. I'm going to carry on Monday morning with this, lesson 3 of Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation through Prayer. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send me an email to rabbi@jewishgardens.com. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com. Give me a call. We'd love to speak with you. We'd love to connect with you. Hope you're being safe. And with that, I would like to let you go. Wish you a good Shabbos and remind you that this Shabbos is the first Shabbos where in the state of Israel that they're keeping Shabbos 100%. There's no public transportations, no restaurants, no pubs, no bars. Everyone's keeping Shabbos. Let's try to do the same over here. You have nowhere to go, not even to shul. Try to keep Shabbos at home. Light those Shabbos candles tonight. Bake some challah. Have a Shabbos meal with your loved ones at home tonight, tomorrow. Take out a prayer book. Read a prayer. Let your heart flow. Let yourself feel the words that are coming out of your mouth, and make sure that they're coming out of your mouth, not reading with your eyes. As Americans, we're trained to read with our eyes. We're not trained to read with our lips and to read with our ears. Read with your lips and your ears. It's going to become a spiritual experience. Try to practice this as we develop in our spirituality. We'll carry on, God willing, next week on Monday. And until then, we'll see you there. Shabbat Shalom. Have a good Shabbos.